So, I'm here to talk about how to appease our AI overlords in the next 5 years by someone who is really nice to Alexa and ChatGPT, so they don't kill me straight away and take some of you before me. I kid. I'm here to talk about the double-edged sword of AI in our world. So, it's a really interesting topic. The last 2 years have been huge for AI, completely different to anything beforehand. There's always trends, but this feels like, especially in terms of code quality, etc., huge thing. Both productivity, a lot of scammers, a lot of everything, but it's this tool that I feel like it's just never existed. There's not even anything's come close to it that I can think of. So there's a bit of a timeline to begin with. So the rise of AI. So 2023 was really the big bang of it. That coincided with ChatGPT going public in November 2022. Copilot went live, I think, in 2021, but wasn't really completely public. And I feel like ChatGPT really is the one that pushed it into a lot of the public perception anyway. So as of 2024, Copilot has 1.3 million paid members. ChatGPT has over 200 million. In the US alone, it has 77 million, with 4 million of them on a paid subscription. So there is, obviously they're the big companies, but that's a huge amount of numbers, especially for paid services. And then at the bottom, kind of going on what's about then, is there was a very big trend, especially at the end of last year, where it felt every single product and feature and anything that you saw advertised had new feature AI, new company AI. AI was absolutely everywhere. Very similar to the crypto trend the other year, where everything then became cryptocurrency. Everything was a coin, everything was a trend, everything revolved around that market. And that's the world we live in. There is trend sellers, and that's how people make money. Either some people make quick bucks, some people make well-established companies off the back of things like this. So, a few popular methods of using this new tech: ChatGPT, Copilot, Codium, Cody. JetBrains have their own. I think I put autocomplete, but I meant JetBrains have released their own AI, essentially autocomplete recently. Claude, Google's, Bard. There's loads. There is so many ways to use this technology. I think I got rid of the slide, but there was a slide where I was saying everything that's an LLM or all these LLMs and everything I just kind of refer to as AI. It's very much easier whilst doing this talk to just refer to everything as this over-encompassing AI. So now this exists. We can now use AI instead of Stack Overflow. We now have got this completely new tool, which is revolutionary in our world, if we face it. It's completely mad. Nothing's existed like it. So, going through the numbers, so this is from GitHub's own thing. Of course, it's going to be biased. It's GitHub's stats about their own product. They're not going to say anything bad. We all know how the world works. But it's quite interesting. So, a 55% increase in speed, that's great wording. But that was what they said, is in their study they had, I think it was 300 developers in their own company do the same task with 150 on Copilot, 150 not on Copilot, and this is where all the numbers came from. They said 55% increase in speed from the people using Copilot. Then they also were on about a 15% decrease in time spent on code reviews. That was a year-on-year statistic. That came out in 2023. The first one came out in 2022. 2024 and 2023. 85% of developers felt more confident in their code quality, which is interesting, as we go on to find later. And then 88% of developers said they maintained flow state easier due to becoming less frustrated and gaining an enjoyment from coding. Again, so these numbers are very, very positive. I think actually, out of interest, a show of hands on people who've used Copilot. So, on the same type of length, who has felt an increase in productivity using Copilot? So that's quite interesting. So a few hands stayed down. I can speak about my experience using Copilot. So I used Copilot for a few months at the start of 2024. So the first one was when I was using TypeScript. I was building an application, a very minor full stack application, which basically was for any of you who follow Premier League football, fantasy football app, which was basically saying when the deadline was getting closer, it'd send me a text through Twilio. And I was like, oh, well, I might as well do this in something I don't use often. I hadn't used TypeScript in close to a year, and I'd only ever used it for front-end stuff. So I was like, well, I'll give Copilot a go, get a free trial, see what all the fuss is about. And you know what, when I was getting it off the ground, I was like, this is incredible. Like, this is going so fast, it knows exactly what I want to write all the time. I'm having a great time, loving my life. And then I thought, as I was getting closer towards what I wanted to do, I think I also write on that, yeah. When I was writing tests in Jest, I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's writing, I can tell it what I want to do, and I can write a test for me, and then I can kind of do work around it. It was great. But then, the closer I felt like I was getting towards the end of my app, the more I realized how much hassle it was to start adding features that I hadn't planned for at the time. My code felt very, like, I couldn't change things. I was stuck in ways. I was having to do lots of refactoring to kind of get around essentially the short-term decisions I was making throughout the process, because I could just say, oh yeah, this looks roughly right. This looks roughly what I want to do. I can click yes, and I can keep going coding, and the rest of it's going great. But like I said, that initial 80% felt like it flew by. That was the fastest I ever got to that point. But then that last 20% also felt longer than the last 20% of any other app I've done. So that was the really interesting thing I got from that. ChatGPT, we use it all the time. We use it not just in tech. I use it for pretty much a lot of things in life. It's great. I think there's a lot of good things to have about it. Once you have knowledge over a subject, and I think this part definitely goes into Copilot as well and any other AI tool, the more knowledge you have on a subject and use it, the better that tool is. You can correct it instantly. When I was going on TypeScript that I hadn't used in over a year and I had never used it in a back-end sense, I didn't really have that experience to correct these small mistakes that I was seeing, well, that I didn't see. Whilst I mainly write in PHP and Go. If I put anything into ChatGPT around that, it tells me PHP is dead. But other than that, it'll tell me these little bits, and I'll be able to see it, and I'll be able to see these little things, and I can be correcting and be like, actually, I don't think this is the correct design pattern for this. I think it should do this. And then it does the classic ChatGPT thing where it says like, of course you're correct. Great job. But I use it all the time. I won't deny that. I think for little jobs, for larger jobs, I think it's really good. Yeah, so I think those last 2 points are definitely the main ones. The more knowledge you can put into ChatGPT, the more you get out of it, definitely. So, if anyone's watched South Park, it's will this become reality, and it's the they took our jobs meme. No. Not for at least, I'm not an oracle. I can't say what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years if someone breaks some new realm of AI that we don't know exists. But I think there's a lot of, especially when it comes to careers and money and financial, people get really worried. It's understandable, right? The world revolves around money. And a lot of people have a lot of concerns around this. So over the last year, there's been so many articles, blogs, videos, even conference talks around how AI will affect our jobs. And in the short term, I'm not really worried. There's so much more that we do as developers that doesn't even go into code. If you think about software development from a high level, we solve problems. And even speaking here today with people, you do so much more than code. You have to go, essentially, it is solving problems. You have to go get requirements sometimes. You have to go communicate to different departments. You have to be able to go understand the financial costs. You have to be able to give advice. You have to collaborate within teams. obviously, then I put manual testing, and then there is a million meetings for the most part, depending on the scale of where you work, but we all have loads of meetings. I don't really see how that can get replaced. Like, the code is such a small part. Now, I think that the code is where it usually takes you to different levels in your career, but there is such a small part that is just actually coding. So I remember seeing this when Devin came out, and I've saved it because it was brilliant at the time for me, is that it was just Devin has missed updating Jira again on a little Teams call. So now switching away from all this and going to kind of, I'd call this one of the direct side effects of it, code quality. Now, these tools are all very confident in what they're doing. They're 100% confident. If you ask it something, it says this is the answer. There's no if, buts, or maybes, this is the answer. And then you tell it's wrong, and it says, oh yeah, actually no, this is the answer. This was wrong, this is the answer. They can become outdated very easily because of the nature of these LLMs. They're trained on models, they're trained on data sets that can become outdated. I recently started looking at Gleam, for example, which has gone to 1.3 and 1.0 in the last 3 months as a language. These don't even exist in these data sets. And because it's updating its like fundamental APIs, if I ask it a question, it tells me something that's depreciated and doesn't even work anymore. But the counter side to that is that if you use something that is long-lasting, then it might give you a decent answer. If not prompted correctly, it can miss design patterns. We were speaking about that before. So I was on about stats. The lack of context can really hurt its performance again. This is sometimes kind of what we're on about before, is either you have to have the context in your mind straight away, or you have to keep going through this feedback loop to get the answer you want, or the right answer. Or you have to keep going through that feedback loop, and the less you know, the longer that feedback lose. Oh, I can't speak. Feedlap? No? Feedback. Oh, there we go. The feedback loop is, God, that was hard. So for an example of that is if you don't know what the issue is, like you might if you're testing a UI thing, for example, you don't really know what the issue is. You put your code in, you run it, your square's slightly off center. You tell it, thingy, it's not ChatGPT, it's not there correctly. Gives you another answer, it's now gone too far the other way. You can't spot this, so you have to keep going back. And if that's if you're using this. There's different now. If you're using alternative ways to learn in the past, if you go on a forum or whatever, if you just go read the docs, you probably get to that solution quicker. But that's for later. So again, this is more stats. So Git Clear did a white paper. Don't know how well that's come across. There is actually red on there, but I'll go over that in a sec. So Git Clear did a white paper on analyzing GitHub trends over the last, from 2020 to 2023 in terms of lines analyzed, and they wanted to understand AI's influence year on year, so 2 years prior and then the last, essentially, 2022 and 2023. 150 million lines were analyzed, and then the main 3 issues were the moved, the copy and pasted, and the churned. So moved lines was decreased 17.3%, the code churn was plus 40%, and copy and pasted lines were at plus 11%. We'll go over these in more on each slide. So, less refactoring equals more mess. So this is the percentage of moved code, and as you can see, from essentially the introduction of AI more in 2022 to going towards 2023, it's gone down, and even 2021 when Copilot came into play. So that was kind of where they wanted to start understanding, is when Copilot comes in, I think, midway through 2021, understanding what's going on. So you can see it's already trending downwards, but the year on year is absolutely crazy. And moved code is basically code you've not refactored. So if you're just adding more code around in files and not touching anything else, you're not refactoring it, you're not trying to repurpose it, you're not even deleting it. This is just code that stays there. So as you can see, it's quite a heavy decline. It goes from 24.69%, you can't really see the numbers, I imagine, down to 16.92. So that is roughly it's like 20% year on year, I think. Yeah. And yeah, so again, that again straight away screams that when you ask AI to do something, it doesn't tell you how to refactor all your existing code. It tells you this is how you can get your problem solved, and you just chuck that in. Code churn. I thought everything has gone down a bit, but I can't really tell. Code churn is duplicated code. So this is, I think I mentioned it at the bottom, yeah. So the issue with this one, and it's quite, I guess, worrying is probably a code quality way of saying it, is they analyzed in a single commit how much duplicated code was getting added. So again, you can see the trends going up, and again, that's because they're doing a lot less refactoring. They don't really care about reusing purposes. It tells you how to get things from A to B, and unless you keep prompting these things, it'll just ship it straight out. It does not matter. It will tell you the simplest way to get to A and B most of the time. So 11% increase year on year. Again, worrying, all this duplicated code. And now there's a big issue in open source, I feel, around all this, because it's just creating more mess. That was one of the big things GitClear wanted to understand, was from an open source point of view, how hard is everything going to become to maintain in certain repositories when everyone can start committing and getting all these things out straight away. So yeah, so the duplicating carries on from the last point of just creating more mess. It is interesting that the number's probably higher than 11% year on year, because if you think about this, they can only analyze duplicated code in a singular commit. If you create 10 commits in a PR, you can have much more duplicated code. So that is probably one of the more concerning ones, from my point of view anyway. And then recent code changes. I feel like these graphs have not come across on there, but it's not much. I probably should have done better on this. But
it's not a great
I'll just have a drink real quick. So recent code changes, and again, I found this one quite interesting. So you can't really see the numbers, but what's happening is basically, I think this is at 64%, and it goes to 71% on the 2022 to 23. And that is code within the last 2 weeks committed that has then been removed. So that has gone up again by 10% from 2022 to 23. So 10% more code year on year is getting deleted straight away. And I feel like, going back to my personal experience on TypeScript early on, is you get really quickly off the ground and you're really happy, and then you realize, oh, I actually need to go change some things, so now I need to go delete a bunch of stuff. And again, interestingly, going back to, again, the refactoring and the lack of refactoring going on, is it's down 24% year on year that code over a month is getting deleted. So it went from 21% to 16% after 1 month is now not being touched. So it's just stagnating. Maybe everyone's getting really good at coding and they don't have to delete code anymore, but these trends are really, really interesting. So that GitClear white paper came out, I think, in March. And a lot of analysis was done over it. But these were probably the main big 3 things that came out of it. So onto going off code quality and onto I'd say probably the inadvertent side effect. And I think learning is probably the biggest thing harmed by AI, especially at the minute. And this was an example I found, and it made me laugh. So I had this exact same interaction with someone else, and it was saying that they don't understand the issue, and you start to explain it, and you say, oh, well, I think if you look at line 15, then you can do this. It says line 11 on here. You start typing, and you get a suggestion, and you click yes. And then you realize that's not actually the solution. This might solve that initial part, but when you're thinking like your next 2 steps ahead of what else you need to go do, you're already now putting yourself at this disadvantage. And like we were saying earlier, is you're already now putting yourself into a corner from refactoring or going on. Problem solving cycle is you get a problem, you do your analysis and diagnosis, you design it, you implement it, you evaluate. straight away, if you have a problem and you get a ticket at work, you get a problem and you put it into AI or whatever, you skip this entire cycle and you go from problem definition to evaluation. And you get none of the benefit of going around that. So, God, there's a lot of words on here. This is a completely made up scale. I'm just going to say this right now. This is something that I remember saying a while ago to someone at work, and I was like, this kind of makes sense in my head. The theoretical scale of solution copiers versus two technical problem solvers. And the idea behind this is, I think from a really, really basic level, this is probably the only, well, not the only way, God, I'm definitely not that smart. I'm probably not smart enough to try and create a scale, but I can say that there is, when you, being a solution copier isn't just copy and pasting, it is basically someone who doesn't understand the solutions they're solving, they're just chucking stuff in until it works. They're not getting that feedback loop of learning because something has gone wrong and, oh, how does that have gone wrong? How do I solve this actually? But just chucking the next solution in until something keeps breaking, until something gets solved. So again, on this slide, they don't understand what they're trying to, most of the time they don't understand what they're trying to solve. They're trying to either get something from red to green or something to look fixed. They chuck it into AI. So I always think this is like Stack Overflow, but on steroids. At least on Stack Overflow, you had to apply critical thinking. You at least had to know the problem to search for it, to then get somewhat of a potential thing, and then apply it to your own code and then fix it. While now you can just you can put everything into ChatGPT or any of the code assistants, and it'll give you a solution, and you don't have a clue how it works, but you can just ship it and hope nothing breaks. So you're not learning anything, and you don't learn and apply these problem-solving skills. So how would you progress through the scale? You find solutions and you solve them. You constantly fail and you constantly improve and you constantly learn from mistakes. You develop good habits. You go through the process of what I feel like everyone else has kind of done before AI, is that you learn, you make mistakes, you get good habits, you learn documentation, you read documentation. You develop all these things and how to get from A to B without having it just given to you. And the issue is, yeah, like I said, you overcome hurdles, you learn, you develop, and you become a better software developer. Why, at the minute, you miss out on everything else on that cycle of learning. There's no feedback loop, there's nothing. And you don't know how to solve it if AI goes wrong. You don't know how to solve these problems if it was taken away. So again, how AI can hinder your progress is a lot of what we were saying then. You don't develop these critical thinking skills. You don't, instead of debugging, again, you just keep putting problems into AI. Now, this feels like a really harsh way of saying all this, because there's a lot of people who will learn from AI. Like they will be able to figure out these issues using ChatGPT. They will be able to use these and learn and ask it even questions, poke it, understand why it's come to this conclusion, stuff like that. But I think for especially new developers who don't have these skills and don't have understanding, it really hinders their progress. So I'm not saying don't use it, and that's kind of what I was going back to then. Is I think you should use it. I just think you need to be, especially the newer you are, the more careful you need to be at building habits. It's incredibly effective at boilerplate. For experienced developers, it's great. There is the same kind of concept that I was saying about new developers, in that if you stop using critical thinking skills, they will, like, your ability to problem solve will degrade. It's like everything. I built a CLI app mainly using ChatGPT at one point, and it was great. So I enjoyed that, but I also ran into the same issues I ran in with my TypeScript thing, where I ran into, if I actually felt like if I just did it myself, I probably would have got there faster, but I would have got off the ground a lot slower. It's a great rubber duck as well. Like, I use it a lot for writing in the past. I don't really know anyone who does a lot of writing, so the closest thing I got to is asking someone for feedback on writing was ChatGPT, and it was quite good. So, the conclusion, don't lose what makes you a developer. Problem solving is the #1 thing that makes developers, in my opinion, and I think really, that's the really big, they can't replace developers if you don't lose what makes you a developer. AI can be a great tool. There just needs to be caution around it. I don't want to have said everything really negative in the end, but towards the end of that, but I think there just needs to be caution. It's a great tool. And then I said, don't try a new takeaway 2 days before presenting, as you may get food poisoning. So that's me. So any questions? I don't know if you do questions, but yeah.
You have some charts there from the white paper.
Yeah.
How did they define that that was related to AI and it wasn't correlation versus causation? And the reason I say that is that I'm a .NET developer mainly, but I work in Python and JavaScript and things. And a lot of things I keep getting feedback from the script programmers compared to like .NET programmers. We can tell you're a .NET programmer because you've written classes and you reuse code. We just write it, copy and paste it, and use it wherever we need to. And it seems to be more of a trend where people aren't, they're not reusing code, they're just copying and pasting. And I wondered how they would define that, if it's not just a causation of people becoming sloppier with their code.
No, I think it's a great question. Originally I had open questions behind it, and I had a very similar question, especially of, I feel like so many more people have got into becoming a developer in the last few years that I feel like you said, like code quality probably does go down, right? But if there's so many, I was trying to get the number, and I think before I looked, I don't think I put it anywhere, GitHub actually got 20.4 new million users in 2022. So that's a lot more code that's probably not going to be that as good. So to understand that, I don't know. But yeah. No, I think from memory, they didn't mention it. I remember thinking that myself, especially when I was going over it before, because it is a really interesting thing. Because I said, I feel like so many more people have got into tech in the last few years as well. That, like I said, by default, it probably is very worse. But then, yeah, it feels like there's also probably a correlation of new developers also using these tools as well, which probably doesn't help the cause of it because they don't know better as well. Yeah.
Everybody gets to a certain level and then new people come in and go, we could do this better. And then they get to that point and go, oh, we just
basically an absolute nightmare, and was dealing with someone who was just trying to get paid bug bounties by someone who was only using AI to ask them to go find issues in the curl library, and he spent spent about a week over Christmas like arguing with this guy on his forum about saying that, like, because he was saying that he seemed like a real person because he was a real person. He was just trying to get money, but he was just chucking it into in code to try and get it. He's like, this isn't online 228 or whatever. So that's a really interesting thing. I also found out there's only one maintainer of curl, which is quite wild for such a big library. But yeah, is there any more? Yep.
Yeah, thank you for such like a balanced appraisal of AI. And given that a lot of what we're seeing at the moment is AI is great, use it for everything, blah blah blah. How do we temper that so that we get people using it in the right ways as you know?
I think it's really hard. I think so. In my current job, we have teams of about 5 to 6. There's as a department, there's probably like over 100, and you're trying to. Especially, I think one of the biggest concerns is I keep thinking it's probably the new developers are always what worry me, and not because of them personally, obviously, but if you're searching how to do this now on YouTube or whatever, these AI videos are like right at the top of algorithm. Like everything is first on like how to do this, this, and this. So it is hard, right? I don't know. I think being able to keep praising it whilst airing concerns, because if you just say how bad it is, no one will listen to you for the most part. So I like to say it's really a useful tool, but you need to really be careful with it. Security was a great point mentioned, code quality, and then, yeah, I think just trying to, I don't really know the answer to the question, other than I think it's really important to not just push it to the side or ignore it is probably the best way. As long as we acknowledge it exists and it's a great tool, then people are probably more receptive to a bit of saying, "Oh, just be careful of it." I don't know if that answered the question at all.
Actually, just to add to the question the gentleman actually asked you, I think having like the AI policies, AI policy, AI guidelines and the guardrails, and making it actually run through all your dev teams and talking that through actually really helps. We've done it in our organization.
We have a policy which is no AI.
Yeah. So having a specific AI policy actually does help.
Ours is no. Don't expect me to be able to answer this. It's more of a question everyone think about me. Because you could just ban it, which our organisation has for a sensible reason. But there are some good use cases for it. It's getting that across because the companies selling it are not going to do that. They're not going to tempt themselves because they're in the middle of a bubble and they've all got all this investment and they're trying to get a return on it. And
it
will, but
It won't stay as cheap as it is now forever. I don't, because now they're trying to get people to buy it. So obviously it's within a relatively decent price range. It's how much it's. I remember GitHub posting how much Copilot was costing them versus how much it's making was like a ridiculous loss. I mean, obviously Microsoft can tank the costs, but in general, like when they try and start trying to turn a penny on it, and people have become over reliant on it, and then that's obviously the concern. Cool. Well, thank you very much. Cool. Thank you.